All right, so today I want to talk about the Star Wars API, so the SWAPI. Now, this Star Wars API, it's not a really deeply rich, feature-rich type API, but it's just something that's fun to work with. It's a fairly simple, straightforward API. It's at swapi.dev/API, and fairly decent documentation for what it does. We've got these items that will come back. So we have a list of potential endpoints. People, planets, films, species, vehicles, starships. Now it only contains the films 1 through 6 and things that belong to those. So it doesn't have all the latest stuff from the last 20 years built into it, but there's a lot of data in here. Now for each one of these, the fun thing about the API documentation that we have here is these are actually links. So if you wanted to see for people, I can click on that. It will take me into here and it shows me if I make a call to make an HTTP GET request to this endpoint /API/people, I will get back the first page of results. Now to save themselves some bandwidth, it's 10 results per page. So we have a results section inside the JSON data that comes back, and it is JSON that comes back. It's always application/JSON. There is another option. You can set the, in the request, you can ask for the format to be set to Wookiee. So we can, on the home page, just swapi dev/documentation. And that links down in the description if you're looking for it. As I was saying, we could make calls to API/planets, API/people, get that list. You can then put a number with there. And all of the items in there, they don't have IDs. It's just based on the positioning. If you took an array of everything that's coming back from all the requests for planets or people, it's a numbered list. It's not in the data itself, so you would have to manage that yourself if you needed it for an application. But really, it's just something fun to play around with. So encodings, getting back to what I was talking about before, we've got JSON is the standard. If you don't provide a format, JSON's what you're going to get back. But you can also ask for Wookiee as the format, and it will translate all the data, send it back as Wookiee. So just a fun little thing that you can do. So let's dive right in, build something simple with it, and see what we can get back from this. All right, I've got a page here, and I've taken what I would get from that root page. So the original page that I was looking at here, API root. We're going to take this, and this is going to be what I use to build my navigation menu. So this right here, I'm dynamically building from my own hard-coded copy of that result. I could have done a fetch call to get it, but it's simple enough. Why not just stick it in there? So the nav area, that's where I'm dynamically building this. The main area is where I'm going to be putting my results that come back. And footer, I'm going to use this to build the previous and next links, which is something that can come back in your result set. So we'll take a look at that. Okay, I have everything namespaced inside of my variable called app. DOM content loaded event fires, I'm going to call the init method inside of here. That's how everything gets started. URLs, that's that root data from the API. So I divided it up. I added base, and I took that part out of all this, so I could use these labels as the actual navigation labels in the HTML. In my init, I build my nav, and I'm adding listeners. So the build nav, I'm looping through that URLs object that I have up here at the top. I'm going to loop through that, skipping over the one with the name base, and I'm just building a series of anchor tags. Each one of the anchor tags, I'm giving them a data link attribute where I'm putting the URL that I want to travel to. I'm doing that because in different parts of my interface, if I want to have URLs that I pass in, maybe it's not an anchor tag, maybe it's a button, maybe it's a div or a paragraph or something else that I'm clicking on. In those situations, by using consistently throughout my application an attribute with a specific name, it allows me to put in URLs that I want to use from different parts of my application. And then we're going to be calling the getData function. Whenever I click on anything in the application, I call this function. This is the one that's going to make the API calls, and I will be able to extract data link, the value of that, and that is the URL that I'm going to do the fetch for. Okay, so we build this navigation menu. We have that right here. If we were to look inside the elements, we're able to scroll this down here. Inside of nav, we can see there's anchor tags, and they all have this data link attribute. Okay, so that's build nav. For my add listeners that's being called at the beginning, all I'm doing is this. You click on the nav menu anywhere, you click in the footer anywhere, I'm going to call the function that does an API call. Okay, so we've got that. Add listeners, build nav, those two things are done, and now my page is loaded. And it's not going to do anything else. The click listeners are going to call this getData function, but it doesn't do anything yet. This is going to be where I put an overlay, I show my loader, my spinner, I do the actual fetch, I get the result back, I make sure it's a valid result, I will convert it from the JSON string that comes back into a JSON object, and then I'm going to call my build function. My build function is going to hide whatever overlay and spinner loader that I have. It will add the HTML. Then we're going to build the navigation at the bottom. Are we on page 1, page 5, page 12 of the results? Well, if I can go to the previous or the next, I want to know that I can do that, and I'm going to provide the navigation to do so. Okay, so this is what we're building. So let's jump right into this. We're going to get the data link out of the anchor tag or button or whatever it is that was clicked. So get data. This is going to be the thing that gets called when the user clicks on something. Prevent default means I don't want the anchor tag to actually take me to the API, because all of these links, if you actually click on them, they will take you to the documentation page for that endpoint for the API. All right, so I'll skip over the overlay right now. We'll come back to that, but I do want to get the URL. So we'll just call it link ev.target. That is the thing that the user clicked on. We're going to get the URL from that, and it's just going to be get attribute data link. So that is the value inside that attribute. So right here you can see SWAPI.dev API/planets or people or films, whatever the endpoint is, that's what we're getting here. So now I've got a URL. I can actually do a fetch. Standard fetch, nothing new about this. If you're familiar with the fetch API. If not, I do have a video. Actually, I've got a whole playlist talking about fetch and Ajax and so on. So we're going to get a response object back inside of our then. The link to that other playlist is up there at the top of the screen. And if it works, I'm going to call my build list. Now this is inside my app object, so I'll say app.buildList, and if there's a problem, I'll just write it out to console.error. I'm not going to do anything fancy with that. Okay, so that's the basic structure. Do the call, we're going to convert it, we need to check that it's okay, and then convert it into an actual object, and it's going to be passed here, and we're going to pass that down to build list. So how do we check if it's okay? So if not response.okay, I'm going to throw an error, throw a new error, and what I'm going to put inside of here is my response.status text. So the actual response text that came back from the server saying, hey, it was a 404 error or whatever the problem is, that's what's going to be sent down to the catch. And if we're good, if we get past that, we will take our response and call the JSON method, which will take our JSON string from the response and turn it into an object that gets passed down to here. This in turn passes it down to here. So now we should be able to see this. the console log data. We should be able to see the actual response coming back from the server. So we'll jump back into the browser, go over to the console. Empty right now, but if I click on people, oh, app not defined. Yes, that should be capital P. There we go. App.build list. Planets. There we go. There's the response for the planets. So there's 60 in total in this database of Star Wars information. The next link, if I expand this a little bit, we can see that it adds a query string, page equals 2. Previous, there is no previous result. So I'm going to look for this next and previous thing to see if they're null or not. If they're null, I don't need to add a previous or a next link. If they're not null, I'm going to actually write them out in my footer. And then the results, there's always going to be 10 for me to loop through, but I'm going to loop through these. And depending on whether it's planets or people, there'll be a slightly different set of data coming through here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab the first value. In most of these, it's name. In a couple of them, it's title. So I'll take name and title. Whichever one of those comes back, that's what I'm going to write out to the screen. And this index number, that's actually going to be the number that would refer to Tatooine, or number 9 would be Camino. Oh, sorry, offset by 1. This is the array numbering. So this would be number 1 and this would be number 10. All right, so let's put that back over to the side. Come back in here and I want to add the data. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at this. Main is our main element, and we're going to say m.innerHTML. I want to take this data, or at least the name properties, turn that into a series of paragraphs with this text inside of it. Best way to work with an array is one of the array methods like map, for each, filter, reduce. We've got those great array methods. We're going to use map because that's going to return to us an array of something else. We can generate an array of HTML. So I'm going to say that I want to do my data, which is this whole thing, data.results. And that's the array that I'm going to loop through. So data.results map. And this function is going to run through and give us back an array of chunks of HTML, an array of HTML strings. So I'm going to take that array and join it together. I'll just put a space in between each of them. But that is going to be my HTML that gets set for inner HTML. All right, so we'll just build this function inside of here. And I'll call it item for each one of my array items here. And I want to get, as I was saying, they're either going to have a property called name or one called title. So we'll say item.name if that exists. If it doesn't, get item.title. One or the other will actually exist for us. So we're going to say here, return. And I want a paragraph. And inside of here, the variable nm, close my paragraph. That's what I'm returning. So I'm going to have an array of these things joined together, and that's what I've set as the inner HTML. All right, so let's just try that. We don't have our bottom navigation, but we should be able to click on people. And there's our series of paragraphs. If I click on planets, that works. Starships, vehicles. Yeah, great. So we're getting the data that we want coming back. We're building a series of paragraphs. I'm not using all the data that's available to me inside these. Like I'm not going inside and pulling out all the different stuff that's available. That would require a little bit more logic. I'm just trying to keep this pretty simple right now. But you have access to all of this the same way that we got to the name property. Some of them, like let's go back to people. Scroll to the bottom here. Here's the people list. Inside these results, for each one of these people, they will have films, so we could list films. They have starships, potentially, so we could list starships. And these entries in this array of starships, you can see there's number 12 and number 22. So I could use that as an endpoint. You know, you click on one of those, take that as the endpoint to then go and load that endpoint from the API, fetch that data, build a new list from that. Okay, so we've got all that. Let's try the overlay loader message. So we can do that inside of get data. So when the user clicks on here, as soon as they've clicked, this is when I want to add my overlay. And in my HTML, I have a div with the class overlay, and then a div with the class loading with the text loading. My overlay is just a partially transparent black thing that covers the entire screen. Loading is just styled so it's white, and then I've added an animation to it to make it fade away and fade back in. So that's probably the most complex part of my CSS that I've got. Most of it's very basic. But the overlay, position absolute, puts it in the top left corner. Width and height, fill the entire viewport. Background, 80% black. Display none because I don't want it by default to be showing. So it doesn't exist until the user clicks the button, at which point I'm going to add the class active, which is going to change the display to flex and my cursor to weight. I'm using flexbox to center the word loading in that div. It's big white text converted to uppercase, and I'm running an animation that's going to run infinitely, and it's going to loop once every second. All I do is take the opacity from 100% to 10% and back up to 100%. All I'm doing, but that is the most complex part of my CSS. So inside of here, to show it, all I have to do is find the overlay, which is something with the class overlay, and I have to add the class active to it. So we can say document query selector, find the thing called overlay, and then class list add active. That's it. That is going to show our loader. We can test that. When I click on one of these, there we go. It's got the waiting icon. It's covering the whole thing. It's pulsing. That's our overlay. To remove it, we just come down here and we reverse this. Instead of add, we remove. So after the data has come back, we hide it. There we go. That's it. That's all we have to do with this loader. We could also do something inside of here if an error happens. So we could come into here, wrap this up inside of a function. We're going to put the error message, whatever it is, in the console, and we'll do the same thing that we did right here. So we'll just take this, take this line. This is the add one, but I'll just change it to remove. There we go. So if an error happens, if there's something that goes wrong or we can't display the results, I don't want it to be stuck with waiting and not let the user click on one of the links, another one of the links. I want to remove it at that point. So whether it works or fails, the overlay is being removed. Now, our last part is this previous and next navigation. We want to look for the next and previous, see if they're null, and then we're going to add those links down at the very bottom. All right, so let's jump back in here into our build, and we're down near the bottom. This piece right here we're going to fill in. We found our footer, cleared it out because there could be previous and next links from the last time we clicked on people or whatever it is. So we want to make sure that we remove that. Then we're going to build these. If data.previous, well, right now data.previous is null. So this is a falsy value. This code will not run for the first return value that we get from the API. Next, well, it's got a string, so that is a truthy value. That one will run. But the code is basically the same for both of them. So let's call it prev, and we'll say we're going to create an anchor tag. We're going to get the value of data.previous, and that's going to become my href. And we're going to do the same thing with the data link property. We want to add that inside there. But what we also want to do is we also want to extract right here, this piece, the word planets, or the word species, or films, or vehicles, or starships, whatever it is. We want to extract that. Easiest way for me to do that is to actually take this string and turn it into a real URL. So we'll say let URL equal new URL, and we'll pass in the value of data.previous. This turns it into a URL object, and I can extract the path name from that, and I'll split it on all of the slashes. So I'm going to take everything that comes after swapi.dev. The path name is all of that stuff right there from API and planets, and even if it's longer, if there's a number or whatever it is. So I'm going to take all of these, and I want to split this on those slashes. Now there will be a slash at the end, which means at the end there's going to be an empty string. So I don't want the last string, I want the second last string. So that's all the pieces of the path, and the one that I want that I'm going to display is going to be labels, and then labels.length, because I'm going to get the second last one, -2. Instead of -1 to get the last, I want the second last one. Now we can set our label, the text content to this label. Now I could just put this in here like that, but I need to know if it's the previous or next. So we'll say previous person, previous species, previous film, whatever it is. And we're going to put the data link value inside there as well. It's going to be the same as the URL. And then append this thing into our footer. So if there's a previous link, now we've got it built into the footer. The next, this is almost the same, it's just a little bit of editing. So we'll say next, 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 next. And I am doing the next one after the previous, so when they get added to the footer, it will be left to right. That was an intentional thing. And this will be data.next instead of data.previous, because that's the thing that we're checking for here. And the last part is changing the label. It'll be label followed by, preceded by the word next, and then the double arrow. All right. So people, there we go. Next people, click on that. Hey, we're on the next page now. The next value is 2 for the first time, and then this result, the next is 3, the previous is 1. So neither of them are null. And if we keep going to the very end, we will reach the end of the 80. We have to step through 8, 9 screens. There we go, and here's the last 2. And we don't have a next, we only have a previous. Okay, so there's building something, working with the data, being able to build previous and next links to navigate through this because it will only give you 10 at a time. Now, you could automate the process if you want. Do promise.all to fetch all of the people, all of the pages. Do the initial call, find out how many there are, subtract 10 from that, and then say, okay, there's 72 left. I've got to make 8 more calls to all the pages, combine them all into a single array so that you've got it cached locally. And then you can do whatever you like with the data. So I hope you have fun with that. I hope you enjoy working with that API. If you have any questions, feel free to leave those in the comments down below. And as always, thanks for watching.